Last week I was on vacation on Maui with my family and I cooked practically every meal. A friend of mine that I was chatting with was like, "What? You're on vacation and you're still cooking?" And the reality is that it's just nicer when we do it that way. I don't do that on every single vacation. If we're traveling and visiting cities, I'm usually not cooking because we're in hotel rooms and we can't really keep the food from one place to the next. But if we're staying for one whole week in one place and we have a kitchen, I am more than happy to continue cooking healthy vegan meals for myself and for my family. And here is why. Of course, there's first of all the cost of food. We paid about, I figure, $500 for groceries throughout the week there. We did eat out for 2 lunches and 1 dinner. Those lunches were around $100 each US, and dinner was probably a little bit more than that. So if we had eaten out at every single meal, it would have been over $1,500 versus those $500 for groceries. And I was not even especially careful with the groceries, and I bought some condiments that will stay in the vacation rental long after we're gone. So I didn't cheap out on anything. So the cost is definitely less. But what is perhaps even more important is the lesser stress of eating in, especially having 4 people with one of them that has quite a selective palate, let's put it that way, and it's hard to find a location, a restaurant that will have suitable vegan options that will make everybody happy all at the same time. And so there's always the stress of negotiating where you're going to eat, and once you're there, trying to figure out what is to be eaten, especially when people are hungry or hangry, and it's just not really pleasant. I'd rather just make simple food at home and we can enjoy our time together. Another factor in there is, of course, nutrition. When we eat out in a less familiar location where there's not that many vegan options, chances are that the vegan options will probably be quite greasy, salty, and or sweet. And that's not exactly the kind of food I want to eat. There's also usually not as many vegetables. Vegetables are expensive. Restaurants don't like to use those so much. And fewer whole grains than there would be if we were eating at home. And lesser greens as well. You know, if we're eating at home, we're eating a lot of greens. Not so much available in restaurants most of the time. So because of the cost, because of the stress, and because of the quality of the nutrition that's available, I much prefer eating in, cooking our own meals if we have a vacation rental with a reasonably equipped kitchen. And I'm being completely honest here. I'm not trying to convince you. It's just my lived experience. It was actually quite simple and not at all a pain to be cooking those meals. Even cleaning up felt easy. And one night I was doing the dishes and I was thinking, how come is this taking only 5 minutes? It feels when I'm at home that doing the dishes takes a lot longer. And so definitely I was doing something a little bit different when we were on vacation cooking those meals. I'm going to share with you what I did and how it was different from a lot of home cooking practices, and why maybe there is some lessons to be learned from that somewhat minimalist approach to cooking that we can use when we're on vacation. There's probably a few lessons that we can bring into our home kitchens as well. First of all, even if I was on vacation, I did a little bit of batch cooking on the day after we got there. And that's because I had a batch cooking, healthy vegan cooking club that was already scheduled. I have to say, if the cooking club had not already been scheduled and advertised and everything, I probably would not have done the batch cooking. But there it was on the schedule. I knew there would be solid internet in the condo we were renting, and I was like, well, why not? Might as well do this and have this opportunity. If you don't know already, the cooking club meets every other Sunday. It's free. Some people that attend there are my clients on the meal planning service, but definitely not everybody. And it's just a Zoom gathering. It is not a cooking class or a lesson or anything. We're all doing our own cooking, but seeing and talking to each other, kind of keeping us from the corner of our eye as we're cooking, chit-chatting about what we're doing. It's a little bit of accountability, but mostly it's community. And having that appointment already scheduled, I was like, well, might as well show up, I showed up and I did a little bit of batch cooking. What did I do? I cooked quinoa, which I probably would not have done otherwise because it takes a little bit of time. So with the quinoa, I prepared a big salad. I had a bunch of kale that I picked up at the farmer's market there, so I prepared the kale. Otherwise, in the rest of the week, as I'll mention later, I was using boxed greens, but I used a whole bunch of kale for that massive salad that my husband and I ate throughout the week. And I also baked some tofu, and I also cooked some other tofu to enjoy as finger food. My kids like to eat just plain cubes of tofu with salt and pepper. And I also roasted Okinawa sweet potatoes that I had found at the farmer's market there. So I had those basic building blocks that I was able to use for lunches that made those meals more nutritious and definitely faster to prepare, as well as faster to clean up for at the end of the day. One thing to take note of, however, that I noticed over the years is that vacation rentals, cottages, typically, even if the kitchen is well equipped, they don't have many containers. And I had remembered to buy some at the grocery store at the very beginning of our trip. I just bought a package of 6 inexpensive plastic Tupperware style things, and that is what I used during the week, as well as some zip top bags that I found in the kitchen over there. So that allowed me to do a little bit of batch cooking and enjoy that food throughout the week. And the containers were reusable. I'm sure someone else will use them in the future. And I kind of liked having bought them myself because I knew they never had like raw meat in them before. So that was a good thing. So batch cooking, first habit to have that makes it relatively easy to enjoy home-cooked meal on a vacation. Another aspect was just keeping priorities in check. Those meals had to be better than restaurant meals in terms of nutrition and general quality, but they did not have to be perfect. And for example, I did not use whole grains other than that quinoa that I cooked in the batch cooking session. I even used ready, instant ramen noodles in some of the soup. I had some better noodles that I found on the first day, and later in the week I didn't find those noodles again, so I had to use some definitely lesser ready-made instant noodles. But that was not the end of the world. It was not my top priority, and it saved a lot of time. It saved using different containers. Also, for example, for noodles, typically the proper way to do this is to cook the noodles separately. But you know what? I just threw the noodles in the soup that time. I didn't get another container dirty. I would never do that at home. Yeah, the texture is a little bit better if you cook the noodles separately, but really not a big deal. I preferred to have a proper meal that I cooked than having a perfect meal that I would have cooked but would have taken longer to clean up for. You have to decide where your boundaries sit. Another shortcut I used was there was accidentally vegan dressing in the fridge of the condo already. It was fine. It was not spoiled. It was probably recently bought. So I used that. I was not going to make my own dressing. My dressing made with cashews and fresh lemon juice and poppy seeds. Yeah, it would have been a lot better, but it would have been quite a bit messier to make that dressing in that little kitchen. Though there was a blender, it would have been possible. But really, I was perfectly okay using the ready-made option since it was vegan and it was sitting there waiting for me to be used. Also, I cooked white rice instead of brown rice, and there was a rice cooker. Those are really quick to use and simple to clean. So that was a shortcut that I was perfectly okay with. If I lived there permanently, I would find a different way and I would get myself organized to cook brown rice. But for 1 week, come on, not a big deal at all. I was very happy with my white rice. I've mentioned the blender already, and I know it's there for the people that want to make nice smoothies during their Hawaiian vacation, but I was not going to do that. And for the whole week, I stuck with the 2 simplest, best kitchen tools there are: sharp knife and cutting board. And the cutting board was not the best. I admit that when I travel by car, if we go to the cabin here in close to Vancouver, I travel with my own personal favorite cutting board and my favorite knife, but I was not going to bring those on the plane on my Hawaii vacation. So I had the plastic cutting board, which wasn't great, but it was good enough. And I was quite surprised to find out that there was an actually really good sharp chef's knife available in the vacation rental. There were actually several, so I was happy. If that would not have been the case, I would probably have gone to a general store kind of place and tried to buy a suitable chef's knife, an inexpensive one that's $15 or $20. It's usually way better than those dull knives that you find in vacation rentals. But I was lucky there was one there. So cutting board and knife, if it could not be done with that, I was not going to do it. For example, there's no way I would have made my own vegan burgers in a food processor there. That would have been completely ridiculous. I was not going to make my own hummus. I bought ready-made hummus, stuff like that. You have to keep it real. And on a day-to-day basis, though, we have to realize that when we get all of those things dirty, that is what adds up in terms of dishwashing time. So keep it simple on vacation, practice your knife skills, and it's all going to be perfect. I was also not going to use a grater, for example, for the salad. Yes, maybe I would have preferred for my carrot to be grated instead of just chopped into pieces for my salads. But so what? There was a grater, but I was not going to take it out and make it dirty and then have to wash it. Also, I never used at the same time more than one pot and one skillet. In some cases, I used the skillet and the rice cooker, but I did not get more than 2 dishes dirty for individual meals. Even for lunch, I was trying to focus on eating leftovers from dinner and some of that big salad that I made in the batch cooking session. So at lunch, there were usually no pots and pans to wash at all. So it makes it a lot easier. Yes, it does limit your possibilities, but it makes it more enjoyable to keep the good, healthy, home-cooked meals coming. Inventory management is also something that we often don't realize we spend a lot of time on. But having all of those different vegetables and fruits and types of grains does add up in terms of things we need to think about, containers we need to clean, and so forth. So for that week, I kept it extra simple. I used the mushrooms. I love shimeji mushrooms, and they had them at the grocery store. I was super excited, so I bought some. I bought a pretty big head of Napa cabbage, and I chopped at it throughout the week until there was none left on the last day. I timed myself quite well, if I can say so myself. I bought carrots, so I used all of those things at practically every meal. The cabbage, which is a cruciferous vegetable, obviously the carrots, source of B vitamins, the mushrooms, which are just wonderful, filled with nutrients. And there was tofu at a lot of the meals. They have this really awesome tofu that I buy. I've only ever seen it in Hawaii, but it's made in the continental United States. I've never seen it anywhere else. It's a super yummy tofu that's made with 2 different types of calcium-based coagulating agents. Anyway, I love it, and it comes in these giant slabs. So we had 2 of those over the course of the week, as well as a couple of cans of black beans, and that was completely satisfying. I did buy a bag of edamame, frozen edamame beans, and we never ended up using them, so I hope the next people that get the rental are going to use my frozen edamame beans. That would have been a convenient addition. We just didn't come around to using them. I also mentioned those sweet potatoes, Okinawa potatoes, purple ones that I roasted, and we chipped at those throughout the week. Even at the end of the week, I was eating them with just hummus on them, warmed up. That was perfectly delicious. And of course, I also used onions. I found some local onions. That was a great find. And garlic and ginger. That's it. I did not need more fancy vegetables. Oh, that's not true. I also had red cabbage that I put in that big salad. But unfortunately, the cabbage was kind of too big and we didn't get to use it all, and I feel bad about the waste. So I would not necessarily recommend red cabbage for just 2 salad-eating people, but if you had 4, it would probably be good. So with those things, what did I make? Well, we had burritos and tacos, so I bought tortillas and I was able to use the beans, and even towards the end of the week, using some tofu in those with the rice. That was perfectly delicious. I made noodle soup, always very simple. It's a hit in my family. My son can have just noodles and broth and tofu, and that is good for him, and the rest of the family has it loaded with all the vegetables. I did buy a package of miso paste, which was a bit of a splurge, a luxury. Not that it was super expensive, but I knew I was not going to use that whole thing of miso for the week. So I'm also very much hoping that the next people that use the condo will be using the rest of the miso. But it was adding depth of flavor into those soups, and I used it in other creative ways also to add flavor here and there instead of using salt, for example. And we had pasta cooked in different ways. I did buy a jar of tomato sauce. That's a shortcut I don't normally take at home. At home, I make my own tomato sauce, but you know what? I'm on vacation. However, you have to look at the labels. I never buy tomato sauce, as I was shocked to see how many of them have a lot of sugar added. And my son was eating his pasta with the tomato sauce and was like, oh, this is really delicious. And I was like, yes, that's because there's so much sugar in it. So you do have to read the labels and realize, though, that a little bit of sugar helps the medicine go down sometimes, and it's not the end of the world. Again, we're on vacation. I also bought ready-made hummus, as I mentioned, and the hummus makes a nice instant sauce. You can look up the blog post on my website, veganfamilykitchen.com. In the recipes section, I think it's called instant sauces. Anyway, I used some greens, some olives also that I found in the fridge there, but Kalamata olives are usually easy to find in a jar, with the hummus stretched with a little bit of cooking water and some other vegetables that I had sauteed, and it made a great pasta dish. It was super simple. We don't need complicated food all the time. Yes, it's nice once in a while to make a fancy dinner with 3 or 4 dishes, but we don't always need that. I also used a limited number of condiments. There was olive oil. I didn't use a ton of it, but I did use a little bit. Soy sauce. There was no balsamic vinegar for some reason in the condo, so I bought balsamic reduction, which was also nice to drizzle on fresh tomatoes. I enjoyed that. And there was chili powder in there and salt and pepper, and that's pretty much all I used in addition to that miso paste. So keeping the seasoning really simple. It still makes, again, very simple dinners, but perfectly delicious. I was not going to get into cooking a complex curry with 4 different kinds of spices when I was there. So keeping it simple, a little soy sauce, a little balsamic vinegar, it goes a long way. Another tip was to make an extra effort while I was there to work clean. It was not a very big kitchen, and so it was extra important to clean up after every little spill. Whenever there was a cutting board or some plate or dish or whatnot that I was finished with, I would clean it up right away, wipe the counter if there was a little bit of a spill. So really making sure to keep things clean as I went, made sure that there was very little to clean or wash after the meal when we were done eating. So working clean on vacation to keep a small kitchen happy makes a world of difference. Maybe this is not for everybody, but it worked really well for us. If you care about your dollars, if you care about eating really healthy vegan food and you want to make sure that you get your vegetables and your greens throughout your vacation time, and of course if you do have access to a kitchen while you're on vacation, I strongly recommend cooking your own. I have another video where I explain some of my best tips to get ready to cook in your vacation rental kitchen. Of course, that includes, I know some people just arrive at the airport and they go straight to the grocery store to buy the groceries, but I do recommend instead going first to the rental, taking an inventory of the kinds of pots and pans, if there's a proper knife, and looking at the spices that are already there, and that will give you a feel for maybe some possibilities. If there's a local farmer's market and it jives with your schedule, go there, try to get some local vegetables, connect with the local farmers. It's always great to have that greater connection with the land and with the locals while you're traveling. Again, this is maybe not for everybody, but if you can pull it off, I strongly recommend just going simple. And when you go home, remembering those tips and tricks, remembering that you can have simple meals at home that are totally satisfying, that are completely healthy. It does not take a lot of effort to make healthy vegan food a reality in your day-to-day life. A lot of our grand visions are influenced by those piles of cookbooks that we have, and they're great. I have a lot of cookbooks too, but on a day-to-day basis, we don't need to cook that way. We can prepare foods that have lots of vegetables, some grains, preferably whole grains, but maybe not all the time, and some bean products like tofu, and it's going to be perfectly healthy for us and the best meals, especially compared to the alternatives out there. So I hope this is helpful. I hope you will be inspired to cook a little bit during your vacation, because it is part of the love you have for yourself and for your family. And I'll see you again soon in the Vegan Family Kitchen. It will be easier to come back to me if you click subscribe, and if you like this video, it will help other people who need it see it. So thank you for being there, and see you again soon.